What did the British really think about Americans in World War II? Were they grateful allies or secretly annoyed by them? Why did British soldiers joke that the Americans were overpaid, oversexed, and over here? The truth behind this wartime relationship might surprise you. In 1939, Britain entered war, feeling anxious and uncertain. London streets felt quiet, tense, and strangely suspended in time. People carried gas masks, expecting bombs at any moment. Yet, across the Atlantic, America seemed calm and distant. To many Britons, America looked like a sleeping giant, a giant enjoying jazz music, cinema, and bright neon lights. Meanwhile, Europe burned and Britain stood almost completely alone. In pubs across London, conversations about America were bitter. Men would sip ale and grumble about American neutrality. They remembered the First World War debts still unpaid. Many believed America had abandoned its closest cultural cousin. One dockworker joked America was the cousin staying home. They watched American movies while German bombers approached nightly. It created a strange mix of admiration and resentment. Britons loved American culture but hated American hesitation. The feeling was simple. Entertainment arrived, but ammunition did not. Meanwhile, Britain's leader quietly worked behind the scenes. Prime Minister Winston Churchill understood the brutal truth about survival. Without American support, Britain might eventually collapse completely. So Churchill wrote long, persuasive letters across the ocean. Those letters went directly to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Churchill wrote with charm, humor, and a little desperation. He called Roosevelt a friend and partner of democracy, but Roosevelt faced a stubborn and isolationist American Congress. Many Americans believed Europe's war was not their problem. They argued oceans should protect the United States forever. So Roosevelt had to move slowly and carefully. Eventually, America offered a limited solution called cushion. Britain could buy weapons, but only with immediate payment. And the British ships must carry everything themselves. Too many Britons, that sounded more like business than friendship. They joked America would sell rope for hangi, but only after receiving payment in gold first. Then came the terrifying year of 1940. Germany conquered France with shocking speed and power. Suddenly, Britain stood alone against the Nazi war machine. Soldiers escaped across the Channel during the Dunkirk evacuation. Exhausted troops returned home, expecting invasion any day. And still, America debated neutrality, laws, and foreign policy. British frustration reached its peak during those lonely months, yet beneath frustration, there was also quiet hope. Britons knew America possessed endless factories and resources. If the giant woke up, the war might change instantly. Some Americans secretly crossed the ocean to fight early. They joined the RAF Eagle squadrons against German aircraft. To the British public, these volunteers felt heroic. They were called the real Americans, who understood danger. In 1941, relations slowly began to shift. America traded 50 old destroyers for British military bases. Many Britons mocked the ships as rusty antiques, but the Royal Navy desperately needed every vessel available. People joked Britain traded luxury cars for second-hand bicycles. Still, the deal signaled America was moving closer. Soon a far bigger program arrived called Lend-Lease. American supplies flooded British docks in massive quantities. Crates carried food, trucks, engines, and endless ammunition. Cans of Spam became a strange symbol of survival. Powdered eggs and wheat prevented hunger during rationing. British citizens stared at labels from huge American factories. They realized American industry operated on unimaginable scale. If something broke, Americans simply replaced it quickly. For rationing-weary Britons, that abundance looked almost magical. That summer, Churchill met Roosevelt near Newfoundland waters. Together, they announced a document called the Atlantic Charter. It promised freedom and self-determination after the war ended. But hidden disagreements worried many British politicians deeply. Roosevelt believed empires should disappear after the conflict. Churchill quietly hoped the British Empire would survive intact. So admiration for America mixed with growing strategic suspicion. Everything changed dramatically. On a December morning, 1941, Japanese aircraft attacked the American base at Pearl Harbor. Across Britain, radios crackled with shocking news reports. Instead of fear, many Britons felt enormous relief. Churchill famously said he slept the sleep of the saved. The United States had finally entered the global war. The lonely years were finally over for Britain. By 1942, American troops began arriving in huge numbers. They stepped onto docks in Liverpool and Belfast. Too many Britons. The sight felt surreal and cinematic. American soldiers looked different from traditional British Tommy troops. Their uniforms were smoother and looked almost stylish. They smelled of chewing gum, cigarettes, and fancy soap. Luxuries long vanished from wartime British shops. The cultural contrast became impossible to ignore quickly. Britain lived under blackout darkness and strict rationing. Clothes were patched, repaired, and reused endlessly. Meals consisted mostly of potatoes, cabbage, and coarse bread. Then American soldiers arrived carrying chocolate and canned peaches. They handed candy bars to amazed British children. Girls received nylon stockings that were suddenly priceless treasures. Money also created enormous tension between the Allies. American soldiers earned far more than British soldiers. They could afford taxis, steak dinners, and lively nights out. Local pubs suddenly filled with loud, confident Americans. Some British men began to feel overshadowed and resentful. A famous phrase quickly spread through towns and barracks. Overpaid, oversexed, and over. Here, people complained. Jokingly, the British pub became the battlefield of cultures. Americans disliked British beer, served warm and flat. Britons disliked American bragging about cars and houses. Still, friendships formed over music, laughter, and shared danger. Another complicated issue arrived with segregated American units. Thousands of Black American soldiers served in Britain. American commanders attempted enforcing racial segregation overseas. But many British locals rejected those instructions completely. Some pub owners welcomed Black soldiers warmly and openly. They disliked outsiders telling them how to treat guests. Ironically, some Britons preferred the polite Black soldiers. They compared them favorably to louder white American troops. By 1943, the relationship became more professional and strategic. British generals believed they had more battlefield experience. Leaders like Bernard Montgomery often criticized American tactics privately. They thought American commanders were enthusiastic but inexperienced. American planners preferred massive assaults using overwhelming equipment. British strategy focused more on patience and gradual pressure. The Americans wanted to invade France immediately. The British feared such invasion would end disastrously. Instead, they pushed campaigns through North Africa and Italy. This disagreement created quiet rivalry inside Allied headquarters. One British officer joked Americans had great equipment, but he wondered if they knew how to use it. Despite disagreements, American air power impressed everyone deeply. Massive formations of B-17 bombers crossed the English skies daily. They flew daylight missions directly into German defenses. British civilians watched the bombers roar overhead each morning. Often many never returned after dangerous missions. Those losses created deep respect among ordinary Britons. Meanwhile, social changes continued across the British countryside. American goods flooded black markets and village shops. Coffee, silk scarves, and canned fruit became prized luxuries. If you had American friends, life felt easier. If not, you waited hours for small rations. Romance also blossomed between soldiers and local women. Thousands of relationships formed during wartime dances and parties. Many British women dreamed of life across the Atlantic. A brighter future seemed possible in wealthy America. By late 1943, a harsh reality became unavoidable. Britain was no longer the dominant Allied power. At the Tehran Conference, Churchill sat beside Roosevelt and Stalin. The world's new power balance was painfully obvious. America and the Soviet Union dominated global decisions. Britain suddenly felt like the junior partner. In 1944, the Allies finally invaded Nazi-occupied France. The massive operation involved American, British, and Canadian forces. American troops played a huge role in the fighting. Later that year, Germany launched the Battle of the Bulge. The brutal winter battle tested American resolve severely. Stories of stubborn resistance spread across British newspapers. One example was the stand at bus. British public opinion shifted toward greater admiration. Americans proved they possessed grit equal to anyone. Still, tensions between commanders never completely disappeared. Montgomery sometimes publicly criticized American leadership decisions. American generals felt insulted by British arrogance, yet soldiers on the ground often cooperated easily. Shared danger created stronger bonds than political disagreements. As victory approached, a deeper realization spread through Britain. America's economic power dwarfed every other nation involved. Factories produced ships, tanks, and aircraft at astonishing speed. Meanwhile, Britain faced shortages of coal, food, and housing. The war had exhausted the once mighty empire. In 1945, victory in Europe finally arrived. Celebrations filled British streets with music and relief. Yet Britain remained poor despite winning the war. America emerged richer, stronger, and globally dominant. Then, shocking news arrived in April. 1945, President Franklin D. Roosevelt suddenly died in office. Many Britons mourned him like a trusted ally. They wondered about the new president, Harry S. Truman. He seemed inexperienced and unpredictable. Two European observers A few months later, another shock transformed global politics. The United States revealed the atomic bomb in Japan. The destruction of Hiroshima stunned the entire world. Britons felt relief the war ended quickly, but they also realized America held terrifying new power. Soon after victory, another painful moment followed quickly. The United States abruptly ended the Lend-Lease program. Britain suddenly faced enormous debts and economic hardship. Many felt America had sent the bill immediately. American troops gradually returned home across the Atlantic. Villages once buzzing with soldiers suddenly grew quiet. Empty airfields and barracks remained scattered across countryside, yet one lasting connection remained between the nations. More than 70,000 British women married American soldiers. These GI brides sailed toward new lives overseas. Families across Britain suddenly had relatives in America. The connection between nations became deeply personal. In the late 1940s, another transformation began. America launched the massive Marshall Plan recovery program. Billions of dollars helped rebuild Europe's shattered economies.